To be honest, my husband stepped in and he said, no, you have a right to life too. I can hardly process that, but that was his insistence, and I'm very grateful for his protection of that. I didn't want to have to show up to an emergency room and hope that somebody understood what they needed to do for me. And the fear of like how they couldn't really tell me that I would survive necessarily.
Our TFMR stories. Today we're joined by Amy, who had to terminate a very wanted pregnancy after a fatal fetal diagnosis of triploidy and potential maternal health complications due to the same diagnosis. Here's her story.
Hi, my name is Amy, and I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I found out that I was pregnant in March of 2020. I wasn't really sure why I didn't have a normal cycle, and took a pregnancy test at home, and we were pregnant. I went to my doctor to get everything confirmed, and when we got our first ultrasound, I was alone because of COVID. It was March 31st, and to my surprise, we were 12 and a half weeks along at that point. So that's how we found out we were pregnant. In terms of a favorite memory, I think one of the most normal things we got to do was to name our daughter. And we named her Elsie Maton. So Elsie means pledge to God, and Maton is Chinese. My husband's Chinese. So it was important that she had a Chinese middle name. And May means beautiful, and Ton means a flower that blooms for a short time at night. So when he came up with that, it was just perfect.
That's a really beautiful name, and I love the meaning that it has in it, and that there are two names and that they go together. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that you went through that alone. I mean, the happy part too.
Right.
Yeah. COVID has taken so much from us.
Oh yeah, we got to FaceTime, but that was it.
Oh, so he was there through FaceTime.
Yes, he was there through FaceTime, and got to see the happy ultrasound. That was the 12 and a half week one.
Mm. Yep. And then at some point you found out something was wrong. What was that? What was that like?
So that was much later in May. So I had a 16-week appointment at the end of April, which is all normal. They only did the Doppler, but everything was great. We did genetic testing. Everything was fine. The screening test. And went to my appointment for the 20-week anatomy scan. And that was about 20 weeks and 4 days. And it was the day after Memorial Day. And at a 7:30 a.m. appointment, also doing it alone, I wrote my doctor the week before saying, hey, I feel like the restrictions are going to lift in June. Should I just move my appointment a couple weeks so that, when it flips over to June, he can come? She's like, no, I'm so sorry. The hospital has a rule, and they're not going to let him come still. And so I got really upset, and I almost changed the appointment. And didn't change the appointment, still went. And I was, again, allowed to FaceTime. And so with the ultrasound tech, she just kept saying that the baby wasn't moving. And so that wasn't a good sign. And I didn't really know what that meant at that point. She just kept saying that it looks like the baby's sleeping. You might have to come back another time. The heartbeat was still very strong. And so she was very confused as to what the problem might be. And so I go to the OB appointment portion after that, and I'm just sitting in a waiting room by myself, and it ends up being like over 30 minutes. And I thought that was a really long time. I thought that was really weird. I was very annoyed that they weren't taking care of me quicker, because I had to set them 30 appointments so that I could get to work after this and do my day after I found out my baby was fine. And the ultrasound tech did bring in the printouts, and there's only 3 instead of 6 ultrasound pictures that they had given me the previous time. And so when the doctor finally came in, she had the other 3 pieces of the ultrasound, and she pointed to portions on the brain that were a problem and let me know that I needed to see a specialist right away. So I'm sitting there by myself, no FaceTiming at this point, trying to grasp that information. And so when she said, you need to see a specialist, she actually said, you need to go upstairs. And so my thought was I need to be admitted to the hospital. I had no idea what that meant. And so she meant that I need to see the MFM doctor. And so she wanted me to wait until I could be seen that day, but they weren't getting back to her right away. And so she said, hey, promise me you'll come back in today and you can go ahead and do a couple of work things that you already have commitments for and then come back later. So she called me, or their office called me later, and I wasn't able to get until noon the next day. So noon the next day, the longest wait of my life, after knowing there's spots in my brain that I have no idea what's wrong, go. And the way that that appointment was supposed to work was I would get to be with my husband for the ultrasound portion. And then my husband would have to go into the waiting room, and then the doctor would come in and talk to me to explain everything by myself. And then we would have a virtual consult with a genetic counselor together. So they told me in advance that I needed a genetic counseling appointment, and that freaked me out because that made me think it's got to be bad if they're already setting me up for counseling. So, but tried to stay as calm as possible and went the next day. And as soon as the ultrasound tech started, the doctor has a screen that she can see in the other room, the MFM doctor. She came in right away and started talking to us about what she was seeing on the scan. So I know that there was something immediately really wrong. And they pointed out abnormalities in the hands and feet. They pointed out a missing portion of the brain that indicated something called Dandy Walker. And they pointed out the growth was very small. We were in like the 2 percentile for where we needed to be on growth for being that far along. And so all these different problems. And that's when we knew, okay, we have a special needs child. We're bracing for that. Okay. And they brought up that we might want to end their pregnancy. And I didn't want to hear it at that point. I said, no, we're Christians. We're not doing that. But why would you even say that? And I was just asking questions, kind of. And the plans that we could do next were to get an amniocentesis and to see a fetal cardiologist. And so they worked some things out for us to see a fetal cardiologist that actual day, and then see the genetic counselor. So we had over 4 hours of appointments back to back. Probably 2.5 hours worth of ultrasounds total by going downstairs for the fetal cardiologist. And again, the baby wasn't moving during any of these appointments, by the way. So Tuesday went, even though there was a heartbeat. So the cardiologist confirmed a lot of problems with the heart. And then the genetic counselor explained to us how the genetic testing works for the amnio, and how we would get initial results back in 2 days and full results back in 2 weeks. And so we did that on that Thursday. So from Tuesday to Thursday, it was just a total whirlwind. The amnio went well. I mean, in terms of like, I didn't have complications from that. They told me there were risks for that. And on Friday afternoon, we got a phone call from the genetic counselor that from the initial amnio results, it was looking like our daughter had triploidy. So triploidy means you have extra chromosomes. Instead of having 46 chromosomes, you have 69 chromosomes, and that's not good. It's not survivable. And yeah, so that was like, and then she said that, you know, the initial results are just the initial results, and you'll get the final results in 2 weeks. But we knew from the conversations we had at the MFM doctor that we didn't have a lot of time because of the state that we live in terms of like what to do.
So what are the time restrictions where you live?
So in Indiana, you have until 21 weeks and 6 days to make a decision. And that's a little bit elusive too, because once you're past 20 weeks, it's a multiple day procedures, and it's also consent forms you have to sign 18 hours in advance is what the rule is in Indiana. So we got that information on Friday about the initial diagnosis. We had no time to wait until the full diagnosis. And then if we were going to go forward, or if we wanted the option to consider a termination, then we would have to at least sign the paperwork on Sunday and then we could wait until Monday to really decide, because that's when the medicine would start for the procedure, then to start on Tuesday. Our deadline was the Thursday of the following week. Yeah, it's so messed up.
Yeah, that week, that's so much a part of so many of our stories. You have a week to decide. Yep. No matter what point yep. you're in, you know, they're trying to get you in quickly underneath these laws. So.
Yes, and you know, I mean, it was just a whirlwind week, but also like I didn't realize like how much I didn't even understand about abortion or the issue itself. And so after we talked to the general counsel on Friday with our diagnosis, she was kind of like, well, if you're even thinking about termination, she's like, you would want to talk to the doctor that handles that, because my doctor didn't handle that post 20 weeks. So that doctor called us, and it was just like a very matter-of-fact conversation, and I don't know how to describe it. It didn't go well. And then she told me she would contact me later to set up a time to come in to look at the paperwork. And so she did that, but she texted me. And when I got those text messages that said, you know, what time do you want to meet me this weekend? What? Like, I already had to decide that right now? So we did that on that Sunday afternoon. We actually had friends volunteer to drive us to the hospital because we were so shaken about what we were about to hear. We met with the doctor for an hour and a half that day and went over the paperwork. And well, before the paperwork, the majority of the conversation actually was just asking her questions, like, is there any chance that you looked over any of the information from everything and you have any kind of different conclusion than what the other doctors did? And she said no. I'm like, true or false, is there any chance our baby can survive? She's like, there's no way for your baby to survive. And then it led into questions about, okay, is she in pain? And our doctor told us that no credible scientist or medical professional believes that there's pain before 24 weeks gestation. I don't know if we're ever going to get an exact answer, and none of us are God, but that's what she told me. And so we knew that at that point we didn't believe she was in pain. And then it went into the reality of, well, what she brought up was, so the question is, how much risk do you personally want to take for the fact that your daughter's not going to survive? And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, you're at risk. So, you know, at that point, we really had to like flip our script in terms of like how we were thinking about everything, because it was certainly the biggest tragedy of my life to lose our daughter, or to think about losing her. But, you know, I couldn't trade. I couldn't do anything for her. And so to like have that realization, and then know that it was going to be very stressful on my body to continue the pregnancy. And then she had to completely be honest with me about the reality of the laws. And that's a big point I want to make right now, is that the laws suck, and they are not pro-life, in my opinion, because what happens is the doctors, they have to cover themselves. Like, there's rules in Indiana, and they can be criminally charged or lose their license if the state doesn't agree with the care. And what the state has done is made it a deadline at 21 weeks, 6 days for abortion. And then after that, the doctors are forced to prioritize the life of the baby over the life of the mother. And it doesn't matter if the technology will tell you exactly that the baby cannot survive inside or outside of the womb. Doesn't matter. There's no exceptions. And it's just not fair. I mean, we didn't get the chance to get the full results of our amnio results to go from there. Our full results honestly did confirm the triploidy diagnosis. Thank God. I mean, not thank God. The second guessing I would have gone through had it not been confirmed would have been hell. And so in one sense, that's why I could say in one sense we were thankful it was confirmed, but you know, we're not thankful that any of this happened, obviously. But yeah, it just, I was speechless. I mean, I've lived in Indiana basically my whole life. And I remember seeing on the news a couple of years ago that the deadline was pushed up from 24 weeks to 20. I honestly pay attention to the deadline, but I now know it was 21 weeks, 6 days. And I thought, gosh, that's really weird that the government needs to be in charge of something like that over something so personal. But, you know, because it wasn't affecting me at that time and I didn't know anyone it had affected, you know, like most headlines, you just say, okay, well, it is what it is. And yeah, it honestly came as a shock to me and honestly everyone I've talked to about it.
Yeah, and these are the cases that they're mostly wanted pregnancies, and then we get the worst news of
Yep.
our whole entire lives that
Yep.
our babies are sick or we're sick or both. And then the doctors are saying, well, you know, this is one of your options, but we can't do it, or you have to go to another state, or first you have to sign the paperwork today. Oh, it's like so much stress on top of what's already the worst.
It added so much trauma. The state's rules added so much trauma to an already traumatic situation.
And then you were talking about your decision in there where it was very rushed because of the cutoff
Yes.
time. So how did you make the decision, and then did you feel like you were ready? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we met with the doctor on Sunday to sign the paperwork, and we're processing that, and then that's when the reality really set in about what the laws actually mean, and how if like we already knew the certain outcome for our daughter Elsie, but we were very uncertain as to what would happen to me. And so I didn't want to get caught. To be honest, my husband stepped in and he said, no, you have a right to life too. I couldn't hardly process that, but that was his insistence, and I'm very grateful for his protection of that. And so I didn't want to have to show up to an emergency room and hope that somebody understood what they needed to do for me. And the fear of like how they couldn't really tell me that I would survive necessarily. I mean, maybe I would have. I mean, I don't even know the numbers, to be honest, but she listed off a whole slew of things that all sound terrible in terms of pregnancy risk complications. And to be like at the mercy of someone who has to decide, oh, am I going to protect myself or am I going to protect my patient, knowing that there's so much invested in their whole life that they've trained for and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education, and to get to their stature to be, I just understood the risk profile, and I wasn't willing to accept that. Well, in the end, we together were not willing to accept that risk. And that's kind of how we got to the decision acceptance part. But in terms of like deciding, we talked to our pastor, who was wonderful. We talked to friends of friends, introduced us to other couples who had gone through significant things that were able to kind of tell us some things about their experiences. That was super helpful. Monday morning, so we were also like, because we found out our diagnosis at the end of the day on Friday, we didn't have a chance to hear back from our MFM doctor. And part of the process too is that you can talk to a palliative care doctor for newborns. So we had those consultations on Monday morning, and after those consultations and the palliative care doctor confirming that our baby, we'd be looking at minutes at the most, and he would be very surprised if that would have been the case as well. And he confirmed for us all of the rules about what happens when doctors have to make all that decision-making process. He confirmed that was a big issue. And we also talked to our MFM doctor, and so probably around noon on Monday, we had to kind of acquiesce that was the decision that we felt was the best for our family and for our daughter. And then even then, we were supposed to come in as early as that morning, depending on when we decided for me to take the medicine that I needed to take to start everything. So it was like within an hour of deciding, we were in the car to go down to the hospital and get me a COVID test and take the medicine that you have to take to start the procedure. Yeah, it was unbelievable. Still.
It just sounds so rushed. And
yeah, and honestly, we technically could have had a little bit more time, but those options get more dramatic. I didn't want to have like a shot. And so so there's, I don't know that I didn't know before all of this, but we were actually given the choice of dilation and evacuation, D&E, or induction of labor. And,
okay, so you were given a choice.
We thankfully, I didn't even know that to be thankful at that point, but we thankfully were given the choice. And so I did choose induction of labor. And so we went in on Tuesday morning to the hospital. And waking up knowing that you're on your way to the hospital for that is just, I can't even imagine. It took me like 20 minutes to even put my feet on the ground. And I was just like listening to music that whole weekend, just trying to like teach my baby her songs and sing to her. We did the induction of labor, and once the hospital took a lot of care into knowing what our situation was. So I was so blessed. I had a one-on-one nurse that day, and they put me in a room on a far end of the labor and delivery unit, so that I wasn't around other mothers, or I didn't have to walk by other mothers even. They obviously gave me more medicine at that point when I got to the hospital every few hours. And I chose all the pain medication, so got the epidural that afternoon, but didn't really progress on the induction until like after midnight. So we got to the hospital around 8 or 8:30 in the morning on Tuesday, and then didn't give birth until 1 in the morning on Wednesday morning. She unfortunately did not survive birth.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
And was this your first pregnancy?
Yes.
It's just so hard. That's
It's,
the experience of the first pregnancy. Yeah. Yeah, and
we got to hold her, and one of the things that we did to mentally prepare ourselves for Tuesday was on Monday night we had our friends hosted a prayer meeting for us, and so we prayed in what we call bucket categories. So we prayed lament for Elsie's diagnosis and the fact that there are diagnoses that can't be cured. We prayed for peace for the decision-making process, and that we would have total peace in our doing what was best for our daughter. We prayed for the medical staff. We prayed for my physical and emotional healing. And it was just like so nice of so many people from our small groups from church, and just like people that we knew pray, to take like an hour and 15 minutes out of their evening. It had to all be virtual because again, COVID, and our city actually had a lockdown curfew that week because it was around when the George Floyd murder happened, and there was a lot of outrage in our downtown. So, and destruction. So, I mean, it was just such a bizarre week anyway.
Wow.
But yeah, so yeah, we prayed, and that really like the community that we have is getting us through this, to heal and or try to heal. But we did have great nurses. So I had the first nurse I had was the day nurse from 7 to 7, and then our night nurse, we just had 2 nurses because there was a trainee nurse or whatever. And so they were both wonderful, and we just got really, really lucky. My doctor, she had spent so much time with us on that Sunday with the paperwork, but she came to visit me. She couldn't be there the whole day, but she came to visit me at the beginning and the end, so she got to meet our daughter. She really cared, and everyone there really cared and treated me like a human, and knew that Elsie was wanted and loved.
Yeah, it sounds like they were really grief informed. They had good bereavement care by placing you apart and then treating you as a grieving mother. And your husband was there with you during labor?
He was there. So thankfully he was able to be there for that. I don't know if I could have done that if he wasn't there. I mean, I don't know. Hearing the stories of people that were alone, I just, I can't.
Yeah. Feel for them too. Yeah.
Yes. So I gave birth around 1. Around 6 a.m. they transferred me to a bereavement suite.
Oh, okay.
And so then we were there from like 6 a.m. until about 6 p.m. Spending time with our daughter. And then we had to come to the realization that we're going home without our daughter. They gave us a memory box. So our night nurse decorated it, and we got pictures taken, and they printed a few of those out, and then we did a few pictures of Elsie and tried to get as good of hair and footprints that we could get.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for people for that like memory making for that time period? Like, what was your favorite part of being with her?
I mean, just holding her. I just didn't want to stop holding her. She was just so incredible to hold, and just marvel at like how far she got. Most triploidy diagnoses miscarry in the first trimester, like 2/3. And we were at like 1 in 250,000 in terms of like getting that far along with that diagnosis. So just marveling at her, although we were devastated. Like once I had the knowledge of what's happening to women, there was no way I was gonna not be able to talk about it once I felt better.
Yeah, because this is fresh. That was June then.
Right. We're looking at a little over 4 months.
Yeah.
Almost fresh. 5 months.
Yeah. What was the physical healing like afterwards, and the emotional and the spiritual healing and grief process? How was that for you?
So I think that is kind of where I would say there was maybe the biggest gap in terms of care, was that there wasn't really a lot of instructions other than like, unless you're really bleeding a lot, like, you're fine, basically. Like there was no follow-up appointment for me to come in unless I requested one. And so I did end up requesting one, but just to be checked out. But there was no automatic like postpartum screening, nothing like that. So anything about my care I had to be completely proactive about in a time where I'm like the most vulnerable, basically. So in terms of healing, it's been really difficult because the bereavement process was a once a month in-person meeting at the hospital where we gave birth, and all of that was shut down for COVID, and there was no like Zoom option or anything like that planned. And so basically there was nothing. So, I mean, there was a bereavement nurse there that I could call if I needed something, but I mean, she would just have like a few minutes here, a few minutes there. And I mean, I know she's dealing probably a lot in terms of miscarriages, when all sorts of losses that is on their assignment, plus they have their regular duties. So I'm not like belittling their efforts. I'm just saying there's not a lot of resources there. And So what we did in terms of healing was we, on Instagram, like I found a lot of like stories using hashtags. And so we found a support group through the not-for-profit Return to Zero. And it was starting in early July, like around maybe July 9th or 10th. And so we signed up for that. And it was a 6 weeks support group. And it was once a week. And then there was an option to extend for 6 more weeks at the end if enough of people in the group ought to do that. So we did that for 12 weeks. And so that's been really great in terms of just like meeting other lost parents. I was so scared to join it because I thought, you know, our losses may not be considered the same as some of the other losses. But thankfully, like, we were embraced and everyone supported us. Everyone supports each other in the group, and we're still friends now. So that all worked really well. And I also see a counselor once a week. So I had that established even before I found out I was pregnant. I wasn't going that often, but thankfully that was something I set up earlier in 2020 and was able to do. And that's been really nice to have someone to talk things out with that can see things through a grief lens.
Yeah, so you met them before you started therapy before this had even happened, and
But not long, yeah,
not very long, and then they turned out to be grief informed as well, so that's great.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, all of those things are so important. It sounds like community has been a really big part of your process and healing journey.
It has. And I think another thing that we were able to do, so Indiana also has a rule that if you're beyond 20 weeks gestation, then you are forced to incur like all funeral costs and burial options. So we were able to have a very small socially distanced graveside service. Oh. And our pastor spoke beautiful words. I couldn't tell you honestly what he said now, but it was just so nice. And, you know, we just told, like, because again, it had to be socially distanced, but we just told a few people, and I said, it's okay if you want to invite a few other people. We ended up having a pretty decent crowd for Elsie, and got to bury her. And her grave recently got done, so that's been healing to go and visit. And I really, like, through the support group and just books I've been reading, like finding a ways to like connect with Elsie, because her name is part of a flower. Like, I really just connect seeing flowers to thinking about her. So
that's beautiful.
We've had a lot of flowers be sent to us, and then we've just gotten some on our own too. So it's been a good, I would by no means say I'm healed. Everything is still so fresh, but I'm finding ways to connect, and I'm trying to survive one day at a time, to be honest.
One day at a time. Yeah. What's something that you would say to someone who has just gone through this loss, a termination recently?
I think I would say, I'm so sorry that this is your reality. I'm so sorry that your baby is not going to be your living child. And I think there's nothing that I can say to make that better. But please know you're not alone. Please know that that your child is loved, and you did the absolute best thing you knew how to. You treated your child with love, and you were the best parent that you could be to your child. And no one can change that. No one. And if you're in a situation where you live somewhere conservative, or you have people that are super opinionated in your life, block them out. They're not what matters. Guilt does not come from God. comes from the devil, in my opinion, and you don't have to carry shame for this.
Yeah, thank you for those words. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think it's so weird how things happen and you don't understand and you don't know the timing, and you just think, why God, why? And unfortunately, we just don't get those answers in this life. And I just want to say that there can still be peace, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm not going to tell you that God's going to use your trial for joy, because that's just not helpful. And I think that this Elsie was such a gift to us, because we can have more compassion now for other people and say, either I know what you're going through if something happens similar, or even if any other grief scenario comes up, we can better empathize with them. And I would like to also say that beyond, you're not going to necessarily get all of the answers. You're not going to necessarily get an immediate happy ending afterwards. We actually, so after losing our daughter in June, my cycle came back in early July, and we actually were immediately pregnant again. And I was so scared, because pregnancy after loss is this whole nother thing.
Yeah.
And you can't go into it carefree and just checking off things you're going to go buy or things like that. You're planning your gender reveal party. That's not how it works when there's pregnancy after loss. And so we were monitored a lot differently in our second pregnancy because of what had happened in our first pregnancy. And that was really great, to get a lot of attention. But then, unfortunately, we found out that there wasn't a heartbeat at our 10-week appointment.
Oh.
So within like a 3.5 months period of time, we had 2 losses. And so we're still working on getting results from genetic testing from that. But I just want people to know that like the journey is not gonna be easy for everyone. Like there's statistics out there that I had no idea existed until this summer about 1 in 4 pregnancies not making it, 1 in 160 births being stillbirth. I don't honestly know the TFMR numbers, but I know it's thousands a year, and it's not tracked even very well. But I just can't believe how much I didn't know about all of these issues beforehand, and so I'm just determined, like going forward, to tell Elsie's story and to help other people understand that there's big gaps in maternal care, and there's maternal mortality rates that are atrocious, not only in the United States, but my own state is one of the worst in the country. And I didn't know that at the time when we were making our decision, but I found out afterwards. And so these are important things to think about, like when you go and find out that you're pregnant, because the doctors are not going to bring them up. They're not going to want to scare you to death, and I don't want to scare you to death either. But the reality is you need to prepare that something could go wrong, and there's other people out there that understand and are willing to walk through it with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, for mentioning all of the things that you've done to work with your grief and all these different resources. I'll make sure to put them all in the description box here below, because you're so right. There's so many gaps, and that postpartum period, whether the baby survives or not, we're left alone. And it's when we need the most care.
Yes, and I would also just like to thank all of our family and friends. I know that the level of support we have is not what everyone has, and I'm just so grateful and thankful.
Yeah, it's so wonderful that they showed up for you. Anything else you want to say?
I don't know what's going to happen in our future. Like, we don't know yet on our TTC journey what's going to happen, but I just want to say, like, I still have my faith in God. Our faith is stronger than ever through this, because we know that God has a plan, whether we have kids living or not. And we like to give thanks, because God's grace to us has been so extravagant in our lives, and we trust God. We just give this whole scenario to Him and say, Lord, tell us what to do next.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your whole story, and for all of these words that you have for other people. So thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you again so much, Amy, for coming on and telling us your story. And I'm Sabrina, the TFMR pregnancy loss doula. And I just want to tell you all that I'm also putting together a grief group specifically for people like us. So if you've gone through a termination for medical reasons, just like how Amy talked about how much the virtual support group helped her, I will soon be running one too. So we're starting on November 15th, and if you're interested, I will put the link here in the description box. You can check out the information. The program is called Ascend, a TFMR Grief Circle. And when you go to that page, you can click on any of the buttons and it will take you to an application form. And then we'll just get on a Zoom call like this and see if we're a good fit and if you'd like to come and join us. So thank you so much. I will see you next week with another TFMR story.